UFC Austin betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this Saturday. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. We're going to get things started in the women's flyweight division as Jamie Lynn Horth takes on Veronica Hardy. Currently, Horth is a minus 185 favorite. The comeback on Hardy is plus 154. And this is one where I honestly thought I'd be betting Horth earlier in the week. It was close to a pick'em. I was definitely considering a bet there, and then it was like I blinked and now she's a sizable favorite where it just makes it an easy pass. But I do think that Horth should be a small favorite here just based on her physical advantages alone. She is going to be the much stronger fighter. She's big for the division. She fought her UFC debut against Haley Cohen up a weight class, won that fight, very close fight, but due to her being physical, you know, she's an okay striker as well. I don't think her skill set is super high. You know, she's the former LFA flyweight champion, and I think she's a solid, like, regional talent, maybe even low-level UFC talent. But I honestly think that should be enough here in this matchup against Veronica Hardy, who I've never really considered to be all that dangerous. And even though she came off a very long layoff in her last fight, she was on the sidelines for about 3.5 years, and she looked great against Juliana Miller, was able to implement her grappling that we really hadn't seen prior to that in her previous UFC fights. But I still have some serious concerns about Hardy in terms of her round winning potential against almost anybody in the division, because she's still undersized for the division. She's not a good striker. Her striking defense is terrible. She gets hit by just about everything, and her offense is just kind of blitzing in, trying to throw these wild combinations, and usually she's getting tagged in those exchanges by any competent strikers. So I think in order to back Hardy here, you have to expect her to be able to do what she did in her last fight, land multiple takedowns, have that grappling advantage. I don't think she has the wrestling or the physicality to take down Horth here and have extended grappling success. The last thing I'll say is Hardy has also had gas tank issues in the past. She's also had concussion issues in the past. So just because she looked good against Juliana Miller, who, by the way, we now know is no good, right? Like she lost her follow-up fight to Luana Santos, got knocked out in the first round. So I think people were overrating that last performance by Hardy, and now I think it's time to hop off that train. I think Horth wins a competitive but clear decision. We're going Horth by decision as the official pick, but in terms of DraftKings, we have a full slate as long as we don't lose any fights. So I just don't think you need to target this fight on either side. Next fight up, we have Wellington Turman, a minus 198 favorite currently. The comeback on Jared Gooden is plus 164. And this is a fun matchup because on one hand, we have Turman, who's on a bit of a losing streak here. He's lost his last two, but he should be able to bounce back in what is a favorable matchup this weekend against Jared Gooden, because he's going to have a significant grappling advantage. You know, he comes from a Muay Thai striking base, but he is more of a grappler. He averages around 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's clearly going to be the biggest advantage in this fight, because we've seen at times Jared Gooden, despite knowing what he's doing on the mat, and I believe he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the dude cannot stuff takedowns, especially once we see him start to get tired. And that's the key here, because in multiple fights, we have seen him fade as the fight goes on. And the more tired he gets, the worse he gets at defending those takedowns. So I do think that's going to be the key advantage here for Turman. On the flip side, the way that Gooden could play spoiler is with that big power. 11 of his 22 wins have come by knockout. He does have power on the feet. I think it needs to come early, but we have seen Turman dropped multiple times. I believe he's been knocked out twice in his career as well. So that's the path to victory for Gooden. He has to land something big, and it probably needs to come early, because if not, I could see rinse and repeat takedowns, a lot of cage control, grappling success on the Turman side. So we're going Turman by decision as the official pick. And the reason I'm going decision is because Gooden, like I mentioned, he knows what he's doing on the mat. He's historically difficult to submit, plays very good defense, and he's very durable as well. So I'd be surprised if Turman were to get a finish. If any finish is happening in this fight, I think it's a Gooden knockout, and I think it needs to come early. But this is one that I'm going to look to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings. I'll probably lean more towards Gooden in terms of my exposure, simply due to the price. Even though I'm not fully expecting him to get the upset knockout, I do think the cheaper price on DraftKings, the higher ceiling, I tend to just gravitate to those type of plays on DraftKings. So we're going Turman by decision as the official pick. Next fight up, we have Rodolfo Bellato, a minus 410 favorite. The comeback on Ihor Potieria is plus 320. And this is a matchup where I think you clearly have to favor the Contender Series graduate in Rodolfo Bellato. Excuse me, actually, both of these guys are Contender Series graduates, but I'm going to go with the one that I actually semi-respect. You know, the Brazilian prospect, Bellato. 10 of his 11 wins have come inside the distance. He's got 2 career losses, and they both came against Vitor Petrino. He was knocked out in both of those fights, and you guys know, if you've been following me, Petrino's a guy that I like quite a bit as a young up-and-coming prospect, so I'm not going to knock him too much for that one. The one clear weakness, I think, of Bellato is he likes to throw a lot of those naked leg kicks. And for a guy that has been chin-checked multiple times, knocked out twice in his career, that is always a concern. But I don't think it's much of a concern in this matchup against Ihor Potieria, who I think we kind of know at this point is just not very good, right? Like, this dude came off Contender Series. He was a dog on Contender Series, ended up winning by knockout, and then came to the UFC, and it was like, oh yeah, this guy's, you know, a solid prospect. You look at his regional tape, it was against a bunch of very, very low level guys, super padded record, and then you see him in the octagon and like the dude just doesn't have it. Like, he's 1-2 in the UFC. His only win came against a washed up Shogun Rua, who I'm pretty sure is over 40 years old, and a ton of losses by knockout, so it's not even that impressive. And then his other 2 losses came against Nikolai Negumereanu, who knocked him out, and against Carlos Ulberg, who knocked him out in the first round. So he's been knocked out 3 times in his career, super padded record, no really impressive wins, and I just don't think the skill set is there. You know, sure, he's got some knockouts, maybe some power or whatever, but we've seen time and time again the gas tank doesn't hold up for him. So I think outside of him being able to land a lucky punch early, which I don't expect him to, I think this is all Bellato here. I think there's a clear advantage on the feet, and I think there's a massive advantage in terms of the grappling. Bellato's a guy that likes to chain submission attempts together. If this fight hits the ground at all, then I think Bellato is going to get a sub here. I'm hoping we get a playable number on the sub. We'll see once some of these domestic books open it up, but I think Bellato gets it done inside the distance. He's going to be a popular target on DraftKings for that reason, but I think it's probably good chalk this week. We're going Bellato by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the featherweight division, we have Quisel Costa, a minus 250 favorite. The comeback on Steve Garcia is plus 205. And this is one where it's similar to the Horth fight in that I think I'm pretty confident on the winner, but I think in terms of DraftKings, I just don't really want any part of it. I do favor the Costa side. I just think he's a better striker and he's more durable. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet in that regard, because I do think he's going to be the cleaner striker on the feet, and he's proven to be pretty durable. Where he struggles is against good grapplers, guys that could potentially threaten to submit him. That's not Steve Garcia's game. Garcia is a one-dimensional power puncher. He's shown the ability to mix in some takedowns in the past, but that's typically not his first game plan, and I don't even think he'll really look to do that here or have success if he does try. I think this one's going to play out on the feet, and I think over time, Costa's just going to prove to be the better striker, more volume, better defense, better durability. So we're going Costa by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our next fight as Drakkar Klose makes his return after about 15 months off. He's minus 125, small favorite here. Joe Solecki on the comeback at plus 105. And despite those concerns with Klose, you know, he's turning 36 years old soon, coming off a decent sized layoff here. Aside from those, I really do think this is a pretty good matchup for him, because stylistically speaking, he's going to be a much better striker on the feet. Joe Solecki doesn't present many issues on the feet. Very low volume striker, not very dangerous, doesn't really have much to his game outside of a couple low leg kicks. But the grappling, that's where Solecki's very dangerous. 9 of his 13 wins have come by submission. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's one of the better back takers in the division, but that's how he has to win his fights, because if he gets stuck on the feet for extended periods, he's not winning minutes, and he's at risk of getting hurt and getting finished, because Drakkar Klose is going to be way more active on the feet, way more powerful on the feet, and I think if the fight plays out on the feet long enough, he could potentially threaten to get a finish on the feet. So I'm going to lean with close despite those red flags. I do think it's warranted just because Solecki just never makes you feel comfortable. He's one of those guys where it's like his wrestling's not very good. So if he's not able to get those grappling exchanges like a Grant Dawson and you see him stuck at range, you're like, all right, well, now I'm dead. So I just think Close has basically most of the upside here. He's a guy that's never been submitted in his career, so he's pretty solid in terms of the defensive grappling as well. So I'm going to side with Close here. I think it's a stylistic clash where either guy can look like a hindsight big favorite, but I just think Close probably fits that mold more times than not. So we're going Close by decision. That's the official pick, but a late round knockout wouldn't be too surprising either. Which brings us to our next fight, as Zachary Reese is a minus 230 favorite. The comeback on Cody Brundage is plus 190. And I'll start off by saying Cody Brundage is, an MMA Twitter hero for taking the DQ win against Jacob Malcone to cash those first round knockout props at really big numbers for a lot of you guys out there. Unfortunately, I had it on FanDuel where they voided it instead of paid it out, but I know other books that people were able to bet that ended up paying it out. So shout out to you guys. So shout out to Brundage for that. But outside of that, man, this dude, I think we just have a pretty big sample of how he can win fights, and a lot of times it's not happening, and when it doesn't happen, he's going to get himself finished. He just has a very limited way to win fights. He's a round one merchant, loves to pull guillotine at every opportunity, even if there's almost no chance of him pulling off the actual submission. He's got power on the feet, but outside of him snatching up your neck early or landing a big shot within the first 2 or 3 minutes, there's basically nothing else that you have to worry about. He'll flop to his back. You can lay on him for 15 minutes. You can probably submit him. He just doesn't seem to want to be in there at times. And this is a guy that has been finished multiple times. I don't trust the durability. And then on the flip side, Zachary Reese, well, he's not this big stud prospect. I have some concerns about him as well. He's coming off Contender Series last season. Very familiar with him. 6-0 prospect. All 6 of his wins have come inside the first round. So the cardio's completely unproven, and so's the defensive grappling, because we've seen him offensively look to grapple. He's actually got a sneaky good submission game. Obviously, we saw the armbar submission on the Contender Series, but on the regional scene as well, we've seen him get kind of crafty with his submission attempts. So for a guy his size, he is kind of sneaky in terms of his grappling, but the defensive grappling, we haven't seen him on his back really for extended periods at all. And again, we haven't seen the cardio either. So I think there's a lot of question marks and potential red flags on the Reese side, but he is going to be the much more powerful striker. He's very nasty with those elbows in the clinch. He's got powerful leg kicks as well. Those are things that are going to give Cody Brundage some fits, but I do expect Brundage to initiate the grappling. And that's where it's like, I think either guy can kind of find a finish, and it wouldn't shock me. This one, I think in my write-up, I put has a lot of meme potential, and I that's the way I'm going to treat it on DraftKings. I'm just going to let ownership dictate my stances. If the field is gravitating to Reese as this big lock to get a finish, then I'm obviously going to be overweight to Brundage. On the flip side, if Brundage ends up getting steam and becoming a popular underdog, maybe I just go overweight to Reese if people aren't really buying into the talent. So I'm just going to let ownership dictate my play in this fight. I am going to pick Reese in terms of the official prediction. We're going to say by TKO. But again, I think either guy can win this, and it's got a lot of meme potential, like I said. Next fight up in the women's bantamweight division, we have Julia Avala, a minus 142 favorite. The comeback on Miesha Tate is plus 120. And we'll start on the Avala side. She's coming off basically a 2.5-year layoff. So I believe there was a couple things. I think she had a baby. She had surgery as well. So there's definitely some red flags in there concerning a long layoff like that. But I do think this is a good matchup for her against Miesha Tate, who also has some red flags, multiple. She's 37 years old, I believe. She's never really been that great since returning to the octagon. She's a fighter that typically has to have wrestling success. She averages a couple takedowns per 15 minutes, but when she's not able to have that grappling success, she's not very good when she gets stuck at range. She's extremely hittable. She seems to have lost a step in terms of her quickness and her defense, and I think that's going to be an issue here against Julia Avala, who isn't like this superstar fighter by any stretch, but she is a pretty good striker. She's typically not very high volume, but she's one of those blitz type of fighters where she's not doing a bunch of constant volume, but when she does decide to let her hands go, it's in short bursting combinations, and she will throw with power. So for that reason, I do think red flags on both sides. I trust the striking of Avala. I think that's the biggest advantage in this fight. And I just don't think Tate really has the physicality and the wrestling to have multiple takedown upside in this spot. So I'm going with Julia Avala by decision. But I will say there is like a small chance of her getting a finish here. I mentioned how hittable Miesha Tate is, how slow she is at times, and Avala is that blitz type of fighter that will throw 6-7 piece combinations. So I wouldn't be surprised to see like Herb Dean or Chris Tione or somebody that has kind of been struggling lately in terms of the referee department just see a big swarm and they're like, oh, fight back, Miesha, fight back, and they just call it early. So maybe I'm just wish casting because I don't expect her to be very popular on DraftKings. So I'm going to have some exposure to the Avala side for that reason, because I do think she's a low-owned play that does have a path to victory of scoring well, but for the most part, I don't think it's going to be a fight that makes or breaks me. We're going Avala by decision as the official pick. Next fight up, we have Joakim Silva, a -340 favorite. The comeback on Clay Guida is +270, and this is one where, again, you have a favorite that you're not super confident in terms of the skill set, but I do think he probably ends up scoring pretty well. You know, I talked about it in the Reese fight, and the same thing fits that build here because Silva is going to be the better striker against Clay Guida, and we know Guida has durability issues. You know, we do have a birthday narrative on the Clay Guida side. He turns 42 years old next week, but this is a guy who's been around for a long time, legend of the sport, been finished a bunch of times. You can clip him. His durability seems like it's finally starting to become a little bit human. We've seen him stumbled and wobbled a couple times in his recent fights. And we know he also has a long history of sticking his neck out there when he's going in on those takedowns. Silva is known more for his striking power, but he does have some grappling as well. It wouldn't be the craziest thing to see him snatch up that neck. Ultimately, I think it's one where Guida starts out competitive, but then somehow finds a way to get himself finished here. We're going Silva by TKO. That's the official pick. And kicking off the main card, we have Punahil Soriano, a -305 favorite. Now the comeback on Dustin Stoltzfus is +245. And we'll start on the Soriano side. You know, he's mainly known for being a one-dimensional power puncher, fights out of the southpaw stance. Most of his wins have come by knockout. And we've seen guys that have solid wrestling and grappling be able to take advantage of him because that's the way that you beat him. You force him to grapple. He does have some wrestling in his background, but the cardio multiple times has not held up for him. So that's the way that you beat him. I don't think that's the skill set of Dustin Stoltzfus. Even though we've seen him at times go to his grappling, he's just not a guy that's going to be very aggressive with it. And I don't think he's going to have the physicality to get in on those hips of Soriano and be able to land multiple takedowns here. I'd be surprised if he even landed one takedown because Soriano initially has pretty solid takedown defense. It's once he gets tired, that's when you can get him to the ground. Guys that are going to chain together multiple takedown attempts. I don't think Stoltzfus is going to do that. And I think in terms of the striking, Soriano is going to be a much more powerful here. The power difference is going to be very obvious once these guys start trading in there. And I think it's only a matter of time before Soriano lands that heavy left hand. Stoltzfus is coming off a first-round knockout loss against Abus Magomedov in the first round. And I think it's going to be a similar thing here where Soriano ends up eventually timing that big left hand and puts him out. We're going Soriano by TKO. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our next fight in the welterweight division. We have Kelvin Gastelum dropping down from middleweight to welterweight. He's going to take on Shawn Brady. We have currently Brady is a -120 favorite. The comeback on Gastelum is +100. And this is a fun matchup. I think a lot of people are split on both sides. You know, Brady was scheduled to fight Jack Della Maddalena back in July. That was an awesome fight matchup, a good stylistic matchup for him too, I think. But he had to pull out of the fight due to like a nasty staph infection. So now he's back. He's been away for a while. His last fight, he fought Belal Muhammad and kind of got exposed to a degree. A lot of people, myself included, thought he might, make a name for himself really by putting a stamp in the division by beating a guy like Belal Muhammad. And Muhammad just tooled him basically from pillar to post, outstruck him, switching stance that really confused Brady, jabbing up his nose, and eventually got the knockout victory. But I do think this is a pretty solid bounce back spot for my guy, Sean Brady here, just because Kelvin Gastelum has looked pretty good recently, coming off a decision win against Chris Curtis. But I think the reason why he's looked better, and obviously now coming down a weight class as well, I think the reason he's looked better is because guys haven't been trying to grapple him recently. His last 2 fights, guys didn't shoot a single takedown on him. The last time someone did was in that Robert Whittaker fight where he landed 4 takedowns. Gastelum has never been great at defending takedowns. He defends around 60% in the UFC. And I think a big reason why Brady struggled against Belal Muhammad is because he was unable to get his grappling going whatsoever. His wrestling is solid. He averages around 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We know his grappling is on point. He just wasn't able to get that going. I don't think that's really going to be a huge obstacle for him here against Kelvin Gastelum, who we've seen give up multiple takedowns in the past. He can be controlled as well. So this is one where I think it's a close fight because I think both guys could have success on the feet. And I think Gastelum being a southpaw could give Brady some issues on the feet, but I think Brady will know that he probably needs to get this fight to the ground. I don't think he's going to have a super hard time in doing so. So I'm going to lean with Brady due to the grappling upside. We're going Brady by decision. That's the official pick. And I do really like overs in this fight. I think it goes a 15 minutes at a very high clip. I don't think either guy has huge finishing potential in this fight, but because Brady does have multiple takedown upside and control upside, I still like him as a target in the mid-range on DraftKings. Which brings us to our next fight in the bantamweight division. So last fight we had Kelvin Gastelum dropping down to a new weight class, the welterweight division. Now we have Deiveson Figueiredo going up to 135 pounds. This will be his bantamweight debut. He takes on Rob Font. Currently, Font is a -135 favorite with Figueiredo on the comeback at +114. And this is a really fun matchup because on one hand, we have Rob Font, who's basically a legend of the division. He's been around for a long time, been one of the better strikers in the division. Very solid jab, high volume, but he's been on a bit of a losing streak here. He's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. He's been getting older. He's been in a ton of wars, and we've kind of seen that durability come into question a little bit. He's not getting knocked out per se in a lot of these fights, but he's getting dropped and stumbled multiple times in some of these fights now, to where I'm not sure the durability is as rock solid as it used to be. And then on the flip side, Figueiredo, he's fought Brandon Moreno the last 4 times that he stepped inside the octagon. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he looks like against a new opponent, against somebody in a different weight class as well. So it's one where I think there's kind of a wider range of outcomes because a lot of the variance that's kind of on both sides, but it's one where I feel okay in leaning into that variance and kind of siding with the underdog in Figueiredo, because I still think he has very dangerous finishing potential early in the fight. He's a very powerful striker, and I think that power is going to translate to 135 pounds. And we know he has one of the best guillotine chokes in the game. So I just think he's got multiple ways to finish here. And then in terms of if it goes to a decision, I know he's had cardio issues at times in the past at 125, but it could have been due to the big weight cut, right? And a lot of those fights were 5 rounders. This one's only 3. So those concerns are kind of negated to a degree. So I like the underdog here a little bit. I like Figueiredo. I'm going to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings, but we're going Figueiredo by submission. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event, as Jalen Turner is a -218 favorite. The comeback on Bobby Green is +180. And this is one where we have Turner stepping in on short notice to replace Dan Hooker. This was originally supposed to be Hooker versus Bobby Green. Turner stepping in on short notice. He's a sizable favorite, and I do think he's being a little bit overvalued here, considering he's coming off a split decision loss to Dan Hooker, where I think cardio was a big key in that fight, and I think it's going to be a key in this fight as well. The way that you beat Bobby Green is you force him to grapple, or you have big power and you land something big like Drew Dober did. And I do think Turner fits one of those categories. He does have that big power, a bunch of wins by knockout, but I don't think he's going to look to grapple basically at all, and I don't think he'd have success even if he did. And in terms of the cardio, especially on short notice, I expect that to be an advantage for the Bobby Green side. So this is one where basically you give me this much plus money on Bobby Green in what should be a striking fight against almost anybody in the division, I'm going to be interested. And then you give me the fact that Turner, who we know has had cardio issues in the past, is now coming in on short notice. I'm definitely interested. So I'm going to side with Bobby Green in what should be a competitive striking match. We're going Green by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our main event as Arman Tsarukyan comes in as a minus 310 favorite. The comeback on my guy, Beneil Dariush, is plus 250. And I hate to say it, you know, I backed my guy Dariush a bunch in the past. I just can't do it here. Even though the number is certainly tempting, I really think that Tsarukyan, this is his fight to lose, because Dariush, where we know his glaring issue is that durability. He's been knocked out 4 times in his career, and even though he's one of the better grapplers in the division, very good striker as well, very good, well-rounded skill set, best scrambler for my money in the division, I just don't think that the durability is going to hold up here against somebody as explosive as Arman Tsarukyan, who does have knockout power, who has freak athleticism, and who has good cardio as well. So even if the fight gets extended, I think Tsarukyan can carry that power. And I think this fight ends inside the distance. I feel very strongly about that. I think it's one you want exposure to on DraftKings. I'm going to look to target both sides, but I'm likely going to be heavier on the Tsarukyan side because I do think he does get the finish, unfortunately. So we're going Tsarukyan by TKO. That's the official pick. And as always, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings. It'll have my ownership projections as well. It's completely free. I'll pin it in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.